Today we're going to talk about the fact that SNIA and the SCSI Trade Association have come together, joined forces, how we describe it. But perhaps before we get onto that, the implications of that, how that's all working, it'd be good to understand a little bit about the SCSI Trade Association, the history, what it's achieved, what it does, etc., up until this point.
Thanks, Philip. The SCSI Trade Association has been around since the mid-90s, and it's been the marketing arm of the T10 committee that defines the specifications for the 11 or so generations of SCSI and SAS technology that we know today. It combines a number of member companies within the industry, from SSDs to systems makers to cable. So it's a large part of the ecosystem. We've been around promoting the latest generation of technology, 24 gig SAS to date.
Okay, and then I guess, as I say, we're talking about the fact that the two of you, the SNIA and SCSI Trade Association, have come together. It'd be interesting to understand, unless there are any secrets you can't reveal, how did that come about? What's the thinking behind it? What were the steps to joining forces?
I'm amused at the thought of having secrets. That's kind of funny. Go ahead, Cam.
Well, just one little known fact about SCSI technology. I mean, it's very, very pervasive in the world, and a lot of people don't even know that they use it. It's kind of been this kind of cryptic technology that's been for high-end enterprise systems, but even in USB devices like your thumb drive uses SCSI commands. Other technologies like Fiber Channel 1394 also utilize SCSI commands. But the joining of forces between the SCSI Trade Association with SNIA began maybe about 1.5 years ago. We had some kind of casual discussions, which grew into more focused discussions on, does it make sense for the STA membership as well as SNIA to have the STA become part of SNIA. In April earlier this year, after many months of discussions, the SNIA leadership voted to approve the joining of SCSI Trade Association, and in May of this year, we officially became a part of SNIA as the SCSI Trade Association Forum.
Okay, and in terms of the forum, because obviously SNIA already has fora, if that's the correct plural of forum or forums, but what is the status of the STA forum? Because clearly the other forums, if I'm right, are all being formed from within SNIA. This one has been brought from outside, and clearly you had your own autonomy. So do you have any slightly, or will this forum have any slightly different status, bit more autonomy, etc., or just how it will appear within the SNIA organization?
As it turns out, SNIA had a rather broad charter for being able to incorporate new organizations and existing organizations into the fold, right? So what we've been able to do is set up a structure inside of SNIA for technical work development, marketing work development, educational work development, and then we've kind of had this special category for affiliates where you have these kind of all-in-one entities like SFF, for example, is an example of an affiliate. The DNA Data Storage Alliance is another affiliate. However, the STA group fits very, very well inside of the forums and initiatives category. Its charter, it's the work that it does, the relationship that it has with T10, all of these things are perfectly aligned with the forum structure that we've currently got. So there was really no need to create something new for it. They still, I say they, it's a little bit difficult for me to try to figure out the right pronouns here. But the STA forum it effectively still has its own charter and is still going to do the work that it's currently doing. The only real main difference that it's going to fall under the broader rubric of the SNIA family. So one of the things that we found to be encouraging by this was that as we start to figure out the way that the relationships between the different organizations inside of SNIA and outside of SNIA become more prominent and more important, the relationships themselves, that is, it makes a great deal of sense to have something like, the STA organization come in and help be a bedrock for that. So I think it's a win-win situation for both organizations, because we've been trying to get inside of SNIA for a while now, a stronger internal bond between the different groups, as well as an external bond with other organizations, and STA fits right perfectly in that sweet spot. So we're very happy about it.
Yeah, from a structural standpoint, we are now a forum, and as SNIA organizational structure has it, I will act as a chairperson for the organization, but we still have autonomy within the group itself to kind of operate the way we were before. So we have a board of directors and officers within that board of directors, a marketing work group, as well as the general membership. So we kind of get the best of both worlds. We can fit nicely in, as Jay mentioned, within the organization from a content standpoint, and we can still operate similarly to the way we have been for many years.
Okay, and Jay, in answer to that, you alluded, I think, to the potential benefit, at least to members within SNIA, but it'd be good to understand what you see as the joint, whether it's one of you or both of you, the joining together. What are the benefits both for the member companies of both organizations, and potentially, I guess there was some membership crossover, but also for the end users? I mean, what will they notice in terms of the benefits that the two of you combined will bring?
I think what the members are going to find is that with the focus on the ability to have stronger relationships between the groups, they'll have resources and expertise that they wouldn't normally have available to them at their fingertips, right? An official relationship between the STA organization and the other groups, whether they be technical or marketing or educational focused, it helps simplify a lot of things that we're trying to do. So it's important to note that over the last 3 years, which is the time period that I've been chair of the organization, we've been trying to get SNIA to be more holistic. In the past history of the way SNIA has worked, which worked very well for the environment in which that it operated, we've tried to shift to more of a synthesis of the different kind of groups, right? We want the technical groups and the educational groups and the marketing groups and the affiliates to all act in concert with each other. Just like any kind of orchestra where you've got a woodwind section, you've got a brass section, you've got a percussion section, they can't all be playing different songs at the same time. So where we start to work on, we have this really robust knowledge base that we've been able to share internally as well as externally. And I think that what the members are going to find is that they're going to be able to have even more experience at their fingertips. One of the things that we're looking forward to, as a matter of fact, is we're going to be completely revising and revamping the way that we present ourselves externally to the world. We're going through that very process, and our websites and our events and our conferences, they're all going to be focused on this kind of synthesis of integration for all of the different events and initiatives and concepts that we all know and love in terms of storage and data relationships.
And in terms of the sorry, Cameron, do you want to add something?
I was gonna, if I might add, I mean, definitely the members of the SCSI Trade Association forum will now have additional access to a range of SNIA technologies and initiatives, as Jay noted. But we're also hoping that we might be able to increase the growth of the STA membership, and of course, with SNIA being a very large organization that does a lot of events. The STA members also can have added participation in SNIA events.
And in terms of just the practicalities, I suppose, such as they are in terms of personnel, I mean, websites, Jay, I think you said there anyway, you're sort of reevaluating what SNIA is doing in that way anyway, but just the transition, if we want to call it that, in the same way two companies merge, hopefully it won't be as painful as some of those are, but no, in terms of the practicalities, what is going to be done over what sort of time frame?
Well, the way I see it is that this is sort of an iterative process of evolution, right? So where we get into trouble is when people fail to understand that there are shoulders of giants that they can stand on, and they try to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to try to see if I can mix more metaphors into this, so bear with me. But where things have gotten to be messy inside of SNIA, and what we're trying to fix, is that we have a lot of hodgepodge organic growth, over the last decade and a half or so. I mean, we've been around for 25 years, but as we started with these different, initiatives and stuff, they've all been kind of separate and isolated and not really well connected. But this kind of is anathema to our current mission, right? We want people to be able to easily find things, and quite frankly, the SNIA collective information dump it's an awful lot like going into a vintage store, right? You kind of there's good stuff in there somewhere, but you really got to have to look for it, and you have to be willing to be in the right mindset to do that. We want to try to fix that, right? We want to make sure that the relationships between the different organizations and the initiatives and the technical and the education, library and all that kind of stuff is very, very easy to find, and the relationships between them is easy to understand. So that's the work that we're trying to do. And I think one of the things that's particularly, I'm particularly enthusiastic about, is that the wealth of knowledge that, the organizations of STA and the organizations of SNIA, which have, these decades of background and history, are going to be something that people can use without having to reinvent that wheel that I was talking about earlier, right? I mean, most of the time is people like, well, I'll just go ahead and do whatever I have to do because nobody's ever done this before, and it turns out it was done 30 years ago, right? So I'm trying to, personally, I'm trying to encourage people to do kind of a yes and approach. Yes, you're doing this, and it relates to something else that someone else is doing. Right. So yes, we're doing DNA storage, and it relates to some of the new media types. Yes, we're doing, SCSI, and it relates to, as Cameron was talking about, USB connectivity and external hard drives, or, whatever it winds up being, right? That yes and approach must have the ability to let you follow it. If we say yes and then you can't do the and part, then it doesn't help. So that's where we're trying to go with that.
Okay, and in terms of, sorry if I interrupt, apologies, Cameron, were you going to add to that, or?
Yeah, I was just going to add, at least from a technology standpoint, the SCSI Trade Association Forum is going to continue to work closely with the T10, as the marketing arm of the technology. From a membership standpoint, we're actually hoping to grow that, the number of members, now that we're accessible, to the larger SNIA membership, and the overall structure and the way we operate is going to remain the same, as it did before we joined forces. But I definitely see a lot of the benefits of being part of SNIA as a larger organization is definitely going to come into play and benefit the STA forum members greatly.
Okay, and I know via Jay and one or two others, I try and keep folks up to date with what the SNIA, what SNIA is focused on, but it'd be good to understand, similarly from STA's point of view, what sort of projects, what work are you currently focusing on within the organization?
Okay, from a technology standpoint, 24 gig SAS has been introduced a few years ago, but the adoption within the industry is now starting to become a little bit more mainstream. In addition to that, in the pipeline, we have what we're calling 24 gig plus SAS, which is not really as much of a speed turn like historically the generations have done, but it's rather looking at some of the key features that improve management, reliability, and security. So SAS, of course, is a very mature technology, and there's not going to be any large, big kind of earth-shattering innovations, but more it's kind of refinement to help keep things very stable and secure and reliable.
Okay, and although I said, Jay, you do keep me up to date, which you do, and I know some of your colleagues do, is there anything you want to highlight as to what SNIA is doing at the moment, or in the pipeline, or do we know about everything at the moment?
Oh, well, I mean, I personally think that the STA announcement is a relatively large one. So I mean, we're really kind of excited about that, and we haven't even, I don't even think we've had a chance to really touch on, the areas of collaboration that we can really truly do. We are excited with some of the things that have been happening. I think one of the things that I'm particularly keen on in the upcoming months is that we've been, over the last year and a half or so, been really broadening our touch points, right? So at the Storage Developer Conference last year, we not only had SCSI presentations, but we had CXL presentations, we had blockchain presentations, we had management presentations, we DNA storage, computational storage, memory movement. We cover so many things, and the reason for that is because there is, and I've been saying this for a long time, there is a collision course between storage and memory, right? And right now we're already at a point where many of the things that people are talking about in terms of storage and memory are already kind of munged, right? We've already got the work inside of NVM Express, which is a fantastic organization, to look at extension of memory into SSDs. We have the ability to do data movement with a smart data accelerator interface, or SDXI, inside of SNIA, which is a software-based portable data mover technology. Well, that opens up memory as a semantic for storage systems, right? And then when you add on to these kinds of granular approaches to accessing data, it doesn't really matter, in a conceptual sense, whether it happens to be, load store addressable, byte addressable, DWORD addressable, block addressable, file addressable. These are all kinds of variations on that particular theme, even though the semantics do wind up changing over time, but they're getting very close together, because our margin for error and latency is going down. Right? It used to be that memory was a 200 nanosecond or 100 nanosecond latency, and storage was 8 milliseconds. We're talking orders of magnitude difference, and now not anymore. Now we're still talking about CXL memory locations that are, just outside of the latency budget, and they're being put inside of, across the CXL link, PCIe links, and so on and so forth, and they're all being put into some sort of persistence. Well, once you start talking persistence, you start talking about systems of reliability, systems of management, systems of protection and security, systems that don't normally have a history inside of memory, but do inside of storage. So as we start to go through these kinds of initiatives, we're just scraping the surface of what can be done when you start to rethink your questions, redefining the questions. And this goes for the memory, it goes for the processing, it goes for the storage world, it goes for the networking, all the things we've been talking about for computational storage and so on, about moving the compute processes closer to the data, whether it be on a network or whether it be local. All of these things have consequences, and we're very excited about the fact that, this is kind of like, I've been kind of likening it to, the Transformers toys, where you have a particular toy or a particular transformer that does its own thing, but then when it's formulated in the right way, it combines with other transformers to create a much larger and more powerful one. I think that that's kind of where we're looking to go here too, is that every one of these different technologies is valuable on its own, but when you combine it with something else, it's much more powerful than just the sum of its parts.
Okay, and in terms of SNIA, I mean, clearly we're talking about the STA today and what the potential of that is, but would it make sense, or are you open to, I know you collaborate, work alongside other different organizations, but could you see a world where instead of having 3 or 4 or 5 different storage focused bodies, it might make sense to all come together under the one umbrella? I mean, I was on FCIA, for example. I know them historically. I was just on the website today before we came here, and they don't seem to have a lot of member companies, but I know they do standards work. But do you think there might be a logic in all coming together, or will you just see if it happens organically, great, but you're not sort of looking to bring everyone together?
I think it's an interesting question. I have a long history with FCIA. I was on the board of directors for a long time. And I've also participated and been a member of T11. So, there's kind of a parallel between STA and T10 and the SCIA and T11. So there is a logic to that. I think part of it has to do, the thing to remember is that there's more to it than just saying we're going to join forces, right? There are licensing requirements, IP requirements, the standards organizations have to align. I mean, for example, T11 is a part of Insights, for instance, right? And the IP structure that SNIA is typically ISO. So those kinds of needles have to be threaded properly. So it's not a trivial nature to go forward. On the other hand, to your point, there is a logic to including these kinds of technologies where they can take advantage of that broad synthesis that we were talking about before, add their instruments to the orchestra, so to speak. So it's not there's no yes or no answer to this. It's just, okay, this is one of those things that we have to try to figure out if it's a good thing to do or not. But we haven't had those conversations yet, to be honest, but it doesn't mean that it can't happen.
Okay, and fair enough. Well, I've got you both here. It'd be remiss of me not to ask her to finish with, at least in terms of the storage industry, if you can, happy both to answer, maybe the number one challenge, and I know, Joe, you talked a little bit beforehand, but the number one challenge, and whether you define the challenge also as an opportunity, but what do you think is the storage industry? What's coming down the tracks that maybe worries you a bit and or excites you, if that's reasonable to ask?
I'll let Cameron talk first, as I've been blathering about for a while.
Thanks. I mean, there are lots of challenges. One of the bigger ones is being able to accommodate and manage and protect all the growth in data that's being created these days. A lot of it is temporarily stored, and a lot of it is permanently stored. And I work at a flash memory maker and an SSD maker, Kioxia, and it's a lot of times it's difficult to keep up with all the demand. But also security, being able, from a data protection standpoint, as well as kind of malware and bad elements, protecting data from that perspective. So I see definitely like encrypting data and other data protection mechanisms are definitely some of the bigger challenges, at least that we see. From an opportunity standpoint, of course, there's plenty of room for innovation and new applications. And one of the things that we're starting to see, at least from a technology standpoint, SCSI SSDs are going to be going up into the International Space Station. So this very mature, proven technology is going to be expanding into space. So we're very excited to see that happen. Jay?
I want to take that your answer, Cam, and kind of turn it a little bit sideways, because I think there's a fundamental question that needs to be addressed first, or at least in concert. And I think that the biggest challenge that the industry has is a fundamental misunderstanding of what storage actually is, to be blunt. As I've gotten to work, so Cam works for Kioxia, and I work for a processing company, right? I work for AMD. So one of the things that I've noticed in my travels is that when people who are not storage people think of storage, they think of capacity. They think of the actual media, whether it be hard drives or SSDs or DNA data storage, right? They think of the actual medium on which the storage is placed, or they think of how much you can put there. That is remarkably short-sighted. Storage is a system. Storage is an approach to saving, preserving, and making data available. Because ultimately you can't just put something somewhere and expect it to still be there when you come looking for it again. So all the systems that have to be put in place, all of the security and the structure and the reliability, all to give you back that bit, that's storage, not just where the bit resides. And this is probably the biggest challenge that I think the industry has, which is when we talk about these things, about the things that we're doing, we're basically casting our voices into the ether if we're using a different definition than the rest of the world thinks. I can tell you from personal experience that the networking people who think of storage as some sort of device at the other end of the wire, the processing people, the ones that I work with in my own company, think of storage as not my problem. We do all the hard work, and it's up to them to have the data stored. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, we wind up with this, this issue that we need to properly convey the significance and the consequences of what data protection, data retention, data management, data movement, actually means, because all of that is what storage is. And it's not a hard line that goes around the concept. It's a fuzzy line, and the Venn diagrams overlap quite a bit. And that's ultimately very true, when the memory collides with storage, when the networking collides with storage, when the computation collides with storage, because thinking of it as solely as a place to store data is going to cause more headaches and more trouble than people even realize.
And I just want to follow that up, because I know I've taken a lot of your time, so I won't be too much longer. But do you think that is potentially because, again, to the outside world, storage, when it first started, came on the scene, if you like, as a topic, it was complicated, it was exciting, a lot of people doing this thing, and over years, it's decades, whatever, it's been seen to be somewhat commoditized, rightly or wrongly. And is that why people therefore don't take it as seriously and understand the nuances of what's going on under the covers, if you like?
Well, I guess it all depends on how cynical you want to be to the answer to that question. I mean, if you look at the history of computation, right, all the way back from the 40s, when we start talking about the massive mainframes and then the mini computers and so on and so forth. The one thing that was not democratized in a way that others have was been storage, right? So the compute became democratized when they moved from mainframes to x86 and the pizza box servers. Networking became democratized when Ethernet became so flexible and pluggable, where you could do Ethernet-based storage, Ethernet-based networking solutions in small scale and large scale, and then of course you had the ARPANET and then ultimately the internet. The ability for a cottage industry to come up and support both the servers and the network, but not storage, was probably what made storage very successful in the 90s and the early 2000s, but ultimately wasn't a good long-term strategy because it became this kind of black art. And then what wound up happening was somebody said, oh, you know what? I could put storage inside of my servers and treat it like it's a server. And so then we have this whole decentralized, disaggregated storage. We have software-defined storage that came out of the software-defined networking, did not come out of regular storage history. And so we kind of wound up with this, well, storage is what storage was 25 years ago, and it's not. So we were kind of a victims of our own approach to doing this, I think, and we don't really have anybody else to blame but our own inability to properly communicate to the audience that we needed to. Well, okay, so it's not too late, right? It's never too late, because we still have a lot of experience in this industry that can be distributed so that the server people and the networking people don't have to reinvent the wheel. But that's going to require outreach on both sides, and a lot of the storage people have to recognize that there are limitations to our own understanding, right? And that kind of arrogance isn't just indigenous to storage, right? I mean, it exists everywhere in all different disciplines. So my personal goal in this is to try to make the outreach as easy as possible for anybody who's curious about this to be able to find the information they need, because in my mind, the most approachable technology is going to win. The easiest to put into place, the easiest to provision, the easiest to deploy, that's going to be the one that's going to be the most important. And I think one of the things that we have an opportunity to do is do that kind of outreach, do that kind of integration with other organizations that may not historically be storage oriented, or conversely may not typically be memory oriented, right? So those aspects are all about redefining the questions, not coming up with better answers, because sometimes the answers already exist if you just look at it a different way.
Okay, so it sounds to me, I don't want to put words in my mouth, but it sounds to me that the coming together of your two organizations is like an early stage of a bigger push to put storage back on the map where it deserves to be. So, but anyway, for now at least, because I've taken a lot of your time, both Jay and Cameron, I really appreciate you giving me the time and sharing some fascinating answers. So gentlemen, thanks very much for your time. Thank you.
That's great, because if you don't like those answers, we've got more.
I'm sure
Thank
we
you,
will
Philip.
speak again. No, thanks again, folks.
All right, take care, y'all.
Bye-bye.